material that we're going to cover is weapon non-specific, like I said. So if you have a long sword, great. If you have a side sword, awesome. If you had a dewsack, also going to work. A lot of this material also translates over to things like the quarterstaff and even the dagger. Meyer's system doesn't really care about the weapon that you're using, with a few notable exceptions. Meyer left us a set of rules, okay? He actually left us 2 sets of rules in his Rostock. The Rostock manual is one that he was basically his notebook. At the time of his death, he was writing notes in it, he was writing down ideas, he was working on additional material. Besides his unique material, it also has a copy of Ringek in it that is where he draws a lot of his early connection to the Lichtenauer tradition. It also has several kind of anonymous glosses that we don't know who they're from, and then a lot of his own notes from it. One set of rules he leaves us is kind of a general guideline to fighting. The other set of rules are going to reference a particular set of diagrams that are in the book as well. I've thrown a website up for you guys, so if you want to, if you have your phone, if you wanted to pull it up and look as we're going, or when you get home to check it out, I posted the link to it on the SoCal Swordfight page, so it's there, but otherwise, Sakima.com/5rules, nice and easy. So I'm going to be going back and forth through those 5 sets of rules. I'll either refer to them as just the 4+1 rules, or individually, or the rules of the diagram, okay? It's going to be a little confusing. I apologize. There's a lot to cover during the time, so we're going to get it. So let's go ahead and get started. The first rule, and this comes from his 4+1 rules. You should conduct all your cuts and thrusts such that you do not lose control of your weapon or overcommit with it. Cool, thanks Meyer, really useful. So that's the other thing on these rules. They take a bit of sussing out of exactly what he means. Repeatedly throughout the Lichtenauer tradition, throughout Meyer, there are a lot of references to fencing with the strength of your whole body, okay? What we mean by this is we're not going to be cutting with our arms. We're going to be cutting with our body. The body is going to drive all the cuts. The arms are simply going to guide the cuts. They're also going to guide the thrusts. They're going to guide all of our structure. One of the most overlooked elements of that is some of the biomechanics that Meyer employs, and in particular some of the rotational stances. The very first image in longsword that you see of Meyer is 2 gentlemen. One standing in long point, and the other standing in an ox-like position. And everybody focuses on what's going on with his hands up in the air. But what they tend to ignore is what's going on with his feet. This gentleman, he's a lefty in this case, but I'm going to do it as a righty, has turned his stance so that the front foot is turned to the side, the rear heel has come off the ground, and he's hanging out here, okay? Throughout Meyer's work, you see this particular stance showing up. Roger Norley, who you guys know who he is from Sweden, had a moment of epiphany while looking at the quarterstaff section and saw a full transition of a cut from the beginning through the end in all of the guards. And again, that image is available if you take a look at it. And what we see is that it's coming from this rotation of the core, not turning on the feet, but rotating the core and letting the feet follow along behind, okay? And that's where we're going to be starting today, because I suspect some of you probably haven't spent time standing like this. Is that a fair assessment? You guys spend a lot of time standing like this? Okay, so we're going to start with that. And we're going to start with this to drive our cuts, okay? Normally in the Lichtenauer tradition, I would always be cutting and finishing to my inside, right? Fairly common for the Italians as well, that you're going to cut to your inside. So we're going to do something at the start here that's opposite that. We're going to cut to our outside. And so we're going to start initially we can start in a low guard, a tail guard, a Nebenhut, whatever you want to call it. And with nice straight arms, driving that cut up and finishing with this turn out. Now things that are happening here, guys, your hips are turning, your shoulders are turning, your head is staying above both of those. We don't want to bend, we don't want to lean, we don't want broken structure. We want that nice, strong position where we can cut up into it. We can then transition and cut right back down the front, okay? And that whole cut is being done with straight arms, no bends, through the core. The core is driving it, right? If you find yourself wobbling a little bit, your rear heel is probably too close to your center line. Kick it out a little bit. Make sure that your feet are shoulder width apart as you do this, so that you can actually rotate up into it and have that line. If you start off with your heels together, you're going to cross too far and find yourself falling. Meyer has short edges. You have short edges. Everyone has short edges. So what you're going to do, put these two things together. We're going to do a short edge into a long edge cut. The short edge is going to start, if I start up here, wherever, right? Maybe I'll start an ox. The short edge is going to happen with that hip turn as I cut through the plunge. Then I can rotate and finish my strike. That hip is the short. The step is the long. But it's all on one side. It's one cut coming on the same line. There. Right? So for you, I would come through with the hip, I would turn, and I would strike. Right? On the same line. So if we're fighting, right, I'm coming in here, there's my hip, there's my strike. Let's move on to the second rule. You should not cut to the body until you have made yourself secure with parry, not only to cut or thrust his body, but so that after delivering the cut, you can recover your weapon and body without harm. Especially as longsword fencers, this is something we have a problem with. Rapier fencers tend not to have this problem quite as much as longsword. Too often with longsword, you get into the mindset of, I need to seize the board. I need to strike immediately into the opening. I need to say, oh, I'm going to attack right into here. Right? I didn't make myself secure with parry. And instead, he gets to make himself secure with parry. It's not where we want to be. We're going to look at this a little deeper, but before we get into it, I want to talk about the binds that we're looking for and the context of the bind we're looking for. Binds can happen in a couple of different ways. I have my own. This part, guys, not in Meyer. This is my way of assessing. Binds have three properties. They have a question of height, either a high bind or a low bind. They have a question of breadth, whether it's to the center or an outer bind, or they have a question of depth, where we're binding in relationship to each other. So the first property, height, I break down into what I call my Spreckfenster and my Breckfenster binds. For you non-German speakers, the speaking window and the broken window. Well, I'm in Breckfenster. That's all I care. Where's the bind? Am I looking under it? The window's broken. Am I looking over it? Window. Cool, I'm in Spreckfenster. I immediately know where that bind is. That's one element. The next element is overbind or not overbind. Okay? Overbind is to the outside. If he strikes wide around at me and I bind on it, cool, I've got an overbind. Lovely, beautiful. My sword is on top of his. That's what I want. And in this case, what I care about is that breadth. Okay? If he's here, my sword's not on top of his. Okay? It's off to the side of his. And it's all from my perspective. Okay? So that's not secure. The last one then that we'll get to is a question of linear strength. And so just give me a point. Give me a point. We can cross weak. Right? We can cross at the middle, or we can be fully on strong. Okay, cool. Get through all that. So, all of this, what? The long edge is for the overbind. If you do not have the overbind, you do not use the long edge. Okay? If he comes in and he gets right to the middle, I can't win this with the long edge. It's impossible. If I try and push over, right, I can try and dominate and push, and I give him a tempo, an opportunity index to knock rice however he wants to do, right? I'm giving him something. But I that, sorry for my French, okay? And I can instead use my short edge. So if he comes forward, right, instead of coming on long, I can come on short. And now this is beautiful, right? Now we can work there and go. And so that's going to be our principle that we're looking for, right? So I'm going to come back to this. If I don't have the overbind, I'm going to use the short edge. And then I will transition to the long edge, okay? So what I want you guys to do before we move on is I want you to just read the bind, right? You're gonna pair off. You don't need mask and gloves for this because you're not striking at each other. It's simply going to be a say he brings the sword forward in a cut-like motion. I'm going to bind on it. I'm going to bind on it, and I'm going to say, oh, okay, Spreckfenster, not overbind at the middle. Read it that fast, right? Because that's going to tell us where to go from there. And maybe he cuts and comes forward again with it, and I step off the side. Cool, Spreckfenster, overbind. Again, we're coming in on the middle, so I can work. I want to read those individual ones. You can even do it, just go to long point. Right, even where I can just say, okay, overbind, on the weak. Spreckfenster. Now he's changed, right? So we're going to take just a couple of minutes, find a friend. Somebody that's within a head height of you will work best for this. first rule. In all bindings, you should hold your blade in the outer circle, upon which you should always have his body with your point, so that no harm befalls you. Then, drive with his parry when he responds, either outside or inside that circle, so you have an opening inside the larger circle between the two, or outside the small circuit. So basically, this passage was really hard to translate. I have 3 different translations of it because Meyer was trying to write in poem, in verse. It's bad. In the bind, we want that outer binding, that overbind position. Okay, that's where we want to be, and we will start our action from there. He will then respond. We are either then going to work to keep the bind in that outer circle, or we're going to carry it down to his inside. But always, when we're going to attack, the bind will be here, or it will be here. I can't attack him if my swords are bound across his chest. That's what the rules is telling us. Okay? So we're going to do for this, to practice it initially, we're going to do Meyer's absetsen. Okay? For those of you that are not familiar with absetsen, here's the description from Longsword. For instance, you come in the onset into the change, and he cuts at you from above. Then go up with the long edge against his stroke, and step at the same time with your right foot towards his left, set him off, then at the moment clashes, turn the short edge and flick at his head. This brings up your question of, does Meyer ever thrust? Yeah, when you read this passage in the Rapier, he describes the same thing, except instead of a short edge, he's stabbing in the face. So, instead of starting this one from the change, we're going to start from something that's more useful when you're actually fighting. We'll start from okay? Our abscess is simply going to be when an attack comes in at us. We're going to extend into long points, putting our point, and therefore our bind, just over the right shoulder or the left shoulder, whichever side it happens to come from. Now, this doesn't necessarily by itself defend us completely. Okay? He could get around this. So that's then where the step is also going to come, to move the body out of the way a little. Now, I'm golden. This is a much bigger distance to have to move. He's now more than a hand away from me. I'm not worried about his point. Then I've established the long edge. I'm going to turn. Because we're going to be nice to each other, we're going to use the longsword version. I'm going to step in. After you put masks on, nice little short edge strike to the head. The only difference, to turn that into a lethal technique, is in, turn, step. It's the only difference. I turn the point in before I step, or I step then turn the point in. If I like you, I give you a little cut on the ear. If I don't like you, I stab you through the face. The second rule of the diagram that follows the previous one. As soon as you cross into a bind with your weapons, then you should cut it with inward winding, doubling through the face and towards the arms, and you should try to regain the bind quickly. So, abscess is great, right? It's a nice strong parry that threatens the face. The downside of it is that because we're parrying so close to the opponent's body, we actually give them the opportunity to work around it, right? So if I strike at Jeff and his bind comes in close on my sword, he's on my strong, right? I'm reading that bind immediately. It's an overbind on my strong, right? That is at a stretch extra distance. And let's give him the chance to strike and turn. Because he is threatening me, but there's just that moment, okay? And so I can double. Maybe I double at the face, maybe I double at the arm. Chances are I'm not trying to go all the way to the body. There's an exception to this with the side sword, and it's Meyer's heart thrust, which is the same thing, where I strike in, and when he goes to bind and I slip over, I fall and stab it. So this is the side sword version of this one, okay? But for the rest of this, we're going to practice Meyer's delivery. He's doubling into the same opening. He's cut long, and then he's going to shift it over with the short edge. But we're immediately going to want to regain the bind, right? Because I'm not parrying, I'm not safe. So I strike in, I catch, and I go for the arm, and then I'm going to wrench to the side. I'm actually not trying to hit him directly, other than his arm. Okay? So that I want to strike here, and then, okay. Now I'm good. I didn't have the overbind. I used the short edge, and then I wound back the long edge in the process by turning my hips. The third rule. You should not let him touch or bind your blade unless you want to intercept, catch, or take his blade. For whenever the blades touch, hit in the bind, you should have a sure opening, otherwise your art is false. For you rapier type fencers and side sword and point forward guys, that makes sense, right? Don't let him gain your sword, unless you want him to gain your sword. Longsword fencers, we don't often think that same way, okay? But don't let him touch your sword. We're going to go on a little bit. I'm going to run out of time, so I'm going to condense a little bit. But he gives us an additional rule. If he falls on your blade, note first, if he falls on the weak, strike around on his blade. If he falls on the strong, jerk his blade. If he falls on the middle, let it run through, and then fall back on it with suppressing, and work it once to the opening. So, Meyer basically is telling us on that. If he's going to come up and bind on my blade in some way, shape, or form. If he's going to be on my weak, I'm going to strike back around with a Dirkbackzone, Cavazione, whatever, changing through. Okay? If he's going to come in and he's going to land on my middle, I'm going to Ablauf and immediately regain. And I'm being nice to Jeff, because what I really want to do on that is suppress through the shoulders. Okay? The last one is if he falls on my strong, basically what we were just doing, I'm going to wrench to the side and control the center. So if they touch your weak, disengage. If they touch your middle, run off and suppress. If they touch your strong, wrench. We're going to do this drill blind. So you're going to close your eyes. You're going to hold your sword out. And he's going to bind you. Oh, it's on my weak. Okay? He's going to bind. And, oh, it's on my middle. He's going to bind. Oh, my strong. And work around. Okay? Feeling where the sword is without using your eyes. Your eyes will lie to you. Always, your eyes will lie to you. Your hands won't. Okay? You need to develop that sense of feeling. So, you'll find your partner, you'll hold your sword out, you'll close your eyes, and you'll feel. The last rule of the diagram, I had done the second rule of the diagram. Now I'm going to jump to the fourth rule. Okay? We'll come back to the third in a minute. When you are led astray or deceived and may be wounded on the crown of the head, suppressing, rukkyun, a short edge strike kind of as a beat. Make you sound if you're quick with them. If you're driven out of the ring, the rule we referenced above, find the next line behind the sword with cuts up and down so that the art you will be able to work again. Basically what Meyer is saying there, and this one needs the visual aid, so look it up when you get a chance later, Jeff, is in the diagram he shows, there's numerous crossing lines, and he's basically saying, okay, I've been driven over and Jeff has gained an overbind. My optimal paths to safety are in this situation to either come from above or in some circumstances to actually come up from below as well. They'll have it happen. And each of the possible binding locations, when you see it, there's a line that basically says, oh, if you're here, come back in. This works across all weapons really well. Dagger shows it particularly good. The only place the person's going to be able to parry and come at you if they come. If Jeff's using his pommel as a dagger, for instance, right, and I'm going to come into parry, if he's going to work from that, it's going to come in either above right there, or his other hand might also come in to attack through on that same line. Look at the diagram. I need a big picture of this. I should have borrowed Tracy's projector. We'll come on back to that, or well, we won't. Anyway, we're moving on. The fourth rule, regular way. So this is knock racing. In all combat, you should take heed of the opponent's limbs, for whenever he gathers them, you have an opportunity for chasing. Also in chasing, you should change around the hilt. Learn to set up correctly for everything. It's knock racing. What I want to leave with you guys on this is normally in German, we think of knock racing as a specific technique. Don't think of it as a specific technique. Think of it as the verb form of using for, knock, and indes, right? How do you conjugate for? You can't. How do you conjugate knock? You can't. You can't say that I'm going to do this thing in the vor in German using that language. You can't say in the knock. But you can conjugate Nachreisen for any situation where you're going to attack in tempo. So for the Italians, for the Germans, it is my contention, and I'll happily argue this with you later if you want, that Nachreisen is simply the German verb for tempo plus a specific note on targeting. very particular. So whenever people bring up that there's no tempo in German fencing, yes there is. It's called Nachreisen, and it applies in all the situations where Italians talk about tempo, right? All of them. You're Italian also? No, okay. It's all right. We won't think less of you. Meyer tells us to change the point, but he immediately gives us a warning on that as well. The third rule of the diagram, the drawn cut changes around the pommel and around the forward point. Changing is dangerous. Therefore, cutting in gives better cover. Meyer wants you to cut into guard. He wants you to enter not by trying to do Durchwechsel, but by actually gaining the appropriate binds from before. So yes, we can change, but it is a fallback option. It is not our intent to do. Okay? We change because we have to, not because we want to. Yeah. And then finally, the fifth and final rule of the diagram, and probably the most important that longsword fencers need to think about. You guys less so, because you already do it. Drive your work first to the weak, then to the strong, then to the body. Fiore is really good for this when he spends time talking about counter guards, right? You're going to go in and he's going to say, oh, this guy's in this guard, so I will counter it with this other guard. Right, that's fencing in the weak. You're at that range. German gets a little bit more fun, and this is probably going to be the last drill that we're going to do to finish it today. Jeff will assume a guard, not one of the primary guards, right? So a secondary guard. Cool, he goes into a tail guard, a Nebenhut. I want to constrain that. So what am I going to use? What would you use to constrain that? What would be a counter guard that you would use as an Italian? If he's down there with the sword on the side. Show me. Show me.
Anticipating what his move might be.
Exactly, right?
So
you're expecting,
yeah.
right? So you want to close off that lower line.
So yeah, if you're coming to that, I would probably stick my blade out.
Right. Okay, perfect, right? So you might go into, for the Germans, some form of Alder, or you might also do a form of Flug. But either way, what have we just countered with? One of the German primary guards. Okay, so then if I go in to Flug, and he knows I'm going into Flug, because that's how I'm going to constrain it, what does then he immediately go to do? Well, he could go up into that, but it also gives him an opportunity now to use the Meisterhaut immediately, right? So that's a kind of a way to get into the use of the Meisterhaut to then break the guard, because secondary guard leads to primary guard, leads to the Meisterhaut coming in to defend or attack against it. Okay? That's kind of how we're going to play around with that. So, choose a guard. Doesn't matter what guard it is. The other person will then seek to either counter it by closing the line, or if you guys don't know that, that's fine. You can just do the counter guards, but we'll play around with that because that's kind of the way to think about this in the week, right? Because we're playing that game at distance. Oh, he's down there, I'm going to go here. So that's going to probably provoke him to want to cut onto my blade. Oh, okay, so that's fencing at the weak, and now we've gained an engagement of the blades. Awesome! Because now I can say, oh, he's on my weak, I can do a disengage and move forward, and now I'm to the middle. He then has an opportunity to respond, possibly by cutting around, and then I have my response to follow through. We can go weak to strong to body. We can go counter guards to Meisterhaut and weak, that then provoke an action to the strong, and only once we've got into a binding on the strong am I then trying to get to the body. Okay? Normally, we would break this up into like multiple steps for the drills, but I think I'm out of time.